My kids will never be smarter than AI.
Because computers can't do everything. They're not going to do everything.
It's not as easy as say like go practice using ChatGPT, but it is doable. People have been able to take care of babies without ChatGPT for a long time. I don't know how I would have done that. Those first few weeks, it was like constantly. Now I kind of ask it questions about like developmental stages more because I can do the basics, but
is this normal?
Yeah, but it was super helpful for that. I spend a lot of time thinking about how my kid will use AI in the future. It is sort of like, by the way, extremely kid pilled. I think everybody should have a lot of kids.
A lot of my friends at OpenAI, former colleagues and current ones, are having kids, and people go like, "Oh, what about this AI thing?" Everybody I know inside is very optimistic in having families.
I think that's a good sign.
Yeah,
like my kids will never be smarter than AI, but also they will grow up.
Way to set them back there, though.
I mean, they will grow up like vastly more capable than we grew up, and able to do things that we cannot imagine, and they'll be really good at using AI. And obviously I think about that a lot, but I think much more about the like what they will have that we didn't than what is going to be taken away. They're like, I don't think my kids will ever be bothered by the fact that they're not smarter than AI. I just like, there's this video that always has stuck with me of a baby or like a little toddler with one of those old glossy magazines going like this on the screen.
Because it thinks it's an iPad.
I thought it was a broken iPad.
Yeah.
And kids born now will just think the world always had extremely smart AI. And they will use it incredibly naturally. And they will look back at this as like a very, prehistoric time period.
I saw something on social media where a guy talked about he got tired of talking to his kid about Thomas the Tank Engine. So he put it into ChatGPT into voice mode.
Kids love voice mode on ChatGPT.
And he was like an hour later, the kid's still talking about Thomas the Train.
Again, I suspect this is not all going to be good. There will be problems. People will develop these sort of somewhat problematic or maybe very problematic parasocial relationships. And society will have to figure out new guardrails and but the upsides will be tremendous. And society in general is good at figuring out how to mitigate the downsides.
Yeah. So, I think optimistic. We're seeing some interesting data where used along in classrooms with a good teacher, good curriculum, ChatGPT becomes very good. Used solely by itself as sort of a homework crutch can lead to kids sort of just doing the same thing as trying to Google stuff.
I was one of those kids that everyone was worried I was just going to Google everything when it came out and stop learning. And, it turns out like relatively quickly kids in schools adapt. So I think we'll figure this out.
Think of what you could have become if you didn't Google everything, Sam.
So
we've seen this adoption figures, which are really insane. It's OpenAI's most popular product. 5 years from now, is it going to be ChatGPT?
I mean, I think ChatGPT will just be a totally different thing 5 years from now. So in some sense, no, but will it still be called ChatGPT? Probably.
Yeah. Okay. So it's still the name. So the other thing we hear is AGI, which I'd like to hear your definition of AGI.
In many senses, if you asked me or anybody else to propose a definition of AGI 5 years ago, based off like the cognitive capabilities of software, I think the definition many people would have given then is now like well surpassed. Like these models are smart now.
Right.
And they'll keep getting smarter. They'll keep improving. I think more and more people will think we've gotten to an AGI system every year. Even though the definition will keep pushing out and getting more ambitious, like more people will still agree to it. But, we have systems now that are really increasing people's productivity, that are able to do valuable economic work. Maybe a better question is, what will it take for something I would call super intelligence?
Okay.
If we had a system that was capable of either doing autonomous discovery of new science or greatly increasing the capability of people using the tool to discover new science, that would feel like kind of almost definitionally super intelligence to me and be a wonderful thing for the world, I think.
So basically, a lot of it's kind of this gradient where it keeps getting better and better. And each one of our definitions go, oh, this feels. I felt like that way when we hit GPT-4 internally playing with this. I'm like, there's 10 years of runway that we can do so much stuff with this. And even when it starts using itself, like you can hit a reasoning, it was really capable. But when you're saying it comes out with some new theorem or proof or something, and then, oh, hey, we found a better cure for cancer, or I found out some new GLP drug or something. Or
Yeah, I mean, I am a big believer that the higher order bit of people's lives getting better is more scientific progress. Like that is kind of what limits us. And so if we can discover much more, I think that really will have a very significant impact. And for me, that'll just be like a tremendously exciting milestone. I think many other great uses of AI will happen too, but that one feels really important.
I was just at an energy conference, and it was interesting talking to the people who were involved in energy production and stuff, and hyperscaling, the term they used for this, was a topic. And that does bring up like the energy requirements. I know that for like Grok 3, apparently, I guess they had to put generators in the parking lot to be able to train that model. And that's the question, is like, where is the energy going to come from? Money, I understand. Energy, to think of when we talk about the scale of the energy needed.
I think kind of everywhere.
Right.
I think it's a big mix right now. Eventually, I think I'm very excited about advanced nuclear, both fission and fusion. But for now, I think it's a whole mix of the entire portfolio.
Right.
Gas, solar, I mean, really nuclear, everything.
So all of the above and stuff. Yeah, I was talking to people that some of them worked in areas like in Alberta where they said we have a lot of access to energy and not as much use for it there, et cetera. And it's just this total picture I hadn't even thought about.
Traditionally, it's very hard to move energy around the world. Most kinds. But if you exchange energy for intelligence and then move the intelligence around the world, it's much easier. So you could put the giant training center or even the big inference clusters in a lot of places and then just like ship the output over the internet.
There was a speaker at OpenAI came to an event, and somebody was working, I think it was the James Webb Space Telescope. And he talked about his biggest bottleneck was they're about to get all of this, terabytes of data, but he doesn't have enough scientists to work on it. Doesn't have enough people to go through the data. And here we have these answers about the universe, whatever, in front of us, and it's like a big data problem.
Yeah, I've always joked that one thing we should do when we have enough money, when OpenAI has enough money, is just build a gigantic particle accelerator and solve high energy physics once and for all. Because I think that'd be like a triumphant, wonderful thing. But I wonder, what are the odds that a really, really smart AI could look at the data we currently have with no more data, no bigger particle accelerator, and just figure it out? It's not impossible.
Yeah.
And yeah, so there's this question of like, okay, there's already a lot of data out there. There's a lot of smart people in the world, but we don't know how far intelligence can go. With no more experiments, how much more could we figure out?
I remember reading something that talked about how in early 1990s, somebody had found like a form of Ozempic, all right, and presented it to like a drug company and said this, and they said, we're going to pass on that. And that's been a life-changing drug for people, like for people who've just basically done chronic obesity, whatever, It's going to improve the quality of life. And you think, oh, this was sitting there for 25 years.
I suspect there's a lot of other examples that we'll find where maybe we already have existing drugs that we know do something good, but they're reusable in some other big way, or with a couple of small modifications, we are very close to something great. And it's been very heartening to hear from scientists using even the current generation models for this kind of work.
So it sounds like one of the things we're going to need, though, for next generation models is models that understand physics and chemistry and stuff. Is Sora sort of a stab at that?
I mean, it'll understand like Newtonian physics. I don't know if it'll help us with discovering new chemistry and sort of like new, like novel physics, or novel theoretical physics, or whatever you'd like. But I think I'm optimistic that the techniques we use for the reasoning models will help us with those things a lot.
Okay. And what is the short definition of how a reasoning model works versus just me asking GPT 4.1 something?
So the GPT models can reason a little bit. And in fact, one of the things that got people really excited in the early days of the GPT models was you could get better performance by telling the model, let's think step by step. And it would then just output text that was thinking step by step and get a better answer, which was sort of amazing that worked at all. The reasoning models are just pushing that much further.
So it's the idea of like when it's able to break the question down, it can spend more time on each step.
When you ask me a question, if it's a really easy question, I might just fire back like almost on reflex with the answer. But if it's a harder question, I might think in my head and have like my internal monologue go and say, well, I could do this or that, or maybe, this will be clearer. I'm not sure about that. And I could like backtrack and retrace my steps. And then when I finish thinking and I've, been thinking in English, I can then, make some bullet points and then kind of like output an answer to you in English.
One of the interesting things I've observed now when I use the app, if I ask a deep research question or something, and I go away on my lock screen, I get it's still processing and thinking about it. And I heard another company, I forget who it was using a metric of how long something spent. I think it was Anthropic, like said, hey, this model actually spent like 15 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever length of time to think about a thing, which is a good metric but it needs to actually give you the right answer. And I thought that was sort of just an interesting paradigm of.
One thing I have been surprised by is people are surprisingly willing to wait for a great answer.
Yeah.
Even if the model's going to think a while. All of my instincts have been, the instant response is the thing that matters and users hate to wait. And for a lot of stuff, that's true. But for hard problems with a really good answer, people are quite willing to wait.
Yeah. So we have all these tools, all these things. So far, I'm using my phone. And now OpenAI just announced that you guys are building hardware. You had the video with you and Johnny Ive talking about you guys have been talking about and collaborating for a couple of years. Obviously, you can't. I could ask you, is it on you right now?
No, it is not.
All right.
It's going to be a while.
Okay.
We're going to try to do something at like a crazy high level of quality. And that does not come fast. But computers, software and hardware, just the way we think of current computers, were designed for a world without AI. And now we're in like a very different world. And what you want out of hardware and software is changing quite rapidly. You might want something that is way more aware of its environment, that has way more context in your life. You might want to interact with it in a different way than like typing and looking at a screen. And we've been exploring that for a while, and we've got a couple of ideas we're really quite excited about. I think it will take time for people to get used to what it means to use a computer in this kind of a world, because it is so different now. But if you like really trusted an AI to understand all the context of your life and your question and make good judgments on your behalf, where you could like have it sit in a meeting, listen to the whole meeting, know what it was like allowed to share with who and what it shouldn't share with anyone, and kind of what your preferences would be, and then you ask it one question and you trust that it's going to go do the right follow-ups with the right people and do like, you can then imagine a totally different kind of how you use a computer to get done what you want.
So kind of the way we interact with ChatGPT is kind of inform the device.
I mean, you could also say that the way we interact with ChatGPT was informed by the previous generation of devices. Mm-hmm. So I think it is this sort of like co-evolving thing, but yeah, I hope so.
One of the things that made the phone so ubiquitous was the fact that I can be in public and look at the screen. I can be in private and have a phone call and talk to it. And I think that's one of the challenges for new devices, is that trying to bridge that gap between what we use in public and private.
Phones are unbelievable things. I mean, they are really fantastic for a lot of reasons. And you can imagine one new device that you could use everywhere, but also like there's some things that I do differently publicly and privately. Mm-hmm. Like at home, I've got a great stereo system to listen to music, and when I'm walking in the world, I use AirPods, and that doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
So I think there are things that are different in the public and private use case, but the general purposeness, I agree, is important.
Yeah, follows you with it. So nothing yet until maybe next year.
It's gonna be a while.
All right.
It will be worth the wait, I hope, but it's gonna be a while.
Okay, I'm excited and curious. I have thoughts. So if you're giving advice to a 25-year-old right now, what do you tell them?
I mean, the obvious tactical stuff is probably what you'd expect me to say, like learn how to use AI tools. It's funny how quickly the world went from telling, the average 20-year-old to 25-year-old learn to program, mm-hmm. to programming doesn't matter, learn to use AI tools. I wonder what will be next, but of course there will be something next. But that's very good tactical advice. And then on the sort of like broader front. I believe that skills like resilience, adaptability, creativity, figuring out what other people want, I think these are all surprisingly learnable. And it's not as easy as say like go practice using ChatGPT, but it is doable. And those are the kind of skills that I think will pay off a lot in the next, couple of decades.
And would you say same thing, a 45-year-old is just learn how to use it in your role now?
Yeah, probably.
Whenever we have whatever your personal definition of AGI, will more people be working for OpenAI after then or before?
More.
So yeah, I see a lot of online people like, they're so good. Why are they hiring people? I'm like, because computers can't do everything. They're not going to do everything.
The slightly longer answer with more than one word is that there will be more people, but each of them will do vastly more than what one person did, in the pre-AGI times.
Right. Which is the goal of technology.
Yeah.